Yes, I do. What is made reference to in the judgment is this culture of collaboration. Well, I believe there's another C word that's far more appropriate, and it is a culture of corruption, because this idea that consultants and staff work closely together, I'm sorry, that's fundamentally fraught. And another major issue I have is how come, what systems were in place to allow for a 7-year period that nobody picked it up, that it was okay to have these verbal arrangements? Who did the auditing internally? Who did the auditing externally? And another major issue I have with that is the audit office, which is the business arm of the Office of the Auditor General, that the council pays the office of the Auditor General, so you pay the auditor and then help set the terms of reference. Give me a break. How's that not fundamentally conflicted in my view?
And can I come to the next question, Councillor Newman?
Thank you, Penny. I haven't had the opportunity yet to read Judge Fitzgerald's judgment on this, but can you make a copy of that? Oh, thank you.
I'll attach the short version to the minutes, but there's a link there.
I'm happy for the long version. I want to read the full judgment.
You need to study it. Yep.
But, I mean, Your Worship, I am in total agreement with what Ms. Bright has said today, and so I'm wondering if a piece of work through the Audit and Risk Committee, or whether it be Procurement Committee or something, I think now that this case is over, one, I'm interested to read more of the transcript of the hearing of the case itself, but more importantly, the public information disclosure that has been talked about, I think is actually something that needs to be investigated with a view to providing more transparency around the tendering and the issuance of contracts, not just by the council but by the CCOs. And I'm wondering if you could sponsor some work around that, Your Worship, because I think that this is not just in light of what has happened in the court, but in terms of public confidence in this council, if we could actually have a work stream developed that could actually provide for greater disclosure around this. I don't necessarily believe that it has to be onerous, because much of the information that would be provided would be information on decisions that have already been taken.
Yes.
But this is simply about trying to provide surety around what is ratepayers' money.
Can I perhaps help you, Councillor, I can provide you with a copy of the letter that I've sent to the CCOs, and also invite you to participate at the Audit and Risk Committee, which will be hearing back from the CCOs around the very questions that I've talked about and that you've raised questions about. If we need to take it further than that, we have the opportunity at that time to do it, but we normally don't make decisions here at the point of hearing from public input. So, can I call on Councillor Watson, please, John Watson?
Thank you. My question, Penny, goes to the position of the Auckland Council as successor to the Legacy Rodney District Council, and in particular the wide feeling in the previous Rodney community that this trial barely scratched the surface as far as what was going on. I wonder what your thoughts are in respect of the frequent references during the trial and the transcript itself to other individuals and to other departments within council that were involved in some shape or form, as to this current council's responsibility to go beyond the one or two individuals in this case who form the crux of the case. Do you have any thoughts on what role this council should be taking?
Although I note that the judge was at great pains to point out we're not blaming all of Rodney Council, we're not blaming all of AT. My point on that is, well, the rest has not been subject to the same ongoing forensic electron microscope that's poured over the particular details of this case. And I keep coming back to the underpinning rule of law, which should not be an optional sort of extra if you feel like it. The underpinning rule of law that would fix this is there. It's been the law for 11 years. It's the Public Records Act 2005. It needs to be implemented. I see no reference to the underpinning Public Records Act in the CCO governance manual. with all due respect, Mayor, I see no reference to it in the letter of expectation to CCOs. I see no reference to the Public Records Act, basically in any documentation that seems to be around. And why is this? Because if it was implemented and enforced in a proper way, we would have that information available for public scrutiny. I'm getting whistleblowers coming to me. I've had a whistleblower who's just come to me to say that he used to work for a firm, good name, good firm, wouldn't pay backhanders and didn't get the contracts, ended up going out of business. Now, like I say, the lid off the 44-gallon drum of worms it's now been lifted, and I believe that there will be a flurry of other disgruntled contractors who missed out, other people who know what's going on. I predict quite a surge of more information. Fix it by making sure the Public Records Act is implemented and enforced, and we know where the money's going. That's the first step.
Last question, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I do want to acknowledge the role that Dr Warburton has actually taken in discovering this early in the piece, and Councillor Lee and I have been aware of this. Yes. What is of concern to me are probably the records relating to the legacy Rodney Council. At the time of the merger in 2010, some of the records were difficult to obtain from the Auckland Transition Authority. Can you give me the assurance that in addition to writing to the CCOs, you'll also, or the CEO for the CCOs, you'll also be writing to the CEO about the work of Council more generally, including the Auckland Transition Authority. We've got the Massey North, which is still yet to come back from the Auditor General. Are there any other matters that you would wish to bring to our attention? So just want the assurance that we will have thorough scrutiny of all of the records since Council's been formed in 2010.
I think the best way to deal with that, Councillor, is if we have a direct discussion with the Chief Executive. If there are other legacy aspects of that council that need to be investigated, and if anybody has any evidence of that, then of course we would follow up. I'll just make the final point that anyone who has knowledge of past corruption or belief that there was past corruption has the channels that they should follow and report that to the police for investigation. Nobody should sit on information simply because it's inconvenient for them to report it if they are aware of any form of corruption. But secondly, we need to make sure that our systems are as watertight as they possibly can be in preventing or detecting quite early the level of corruption or any form of corruption that might exist. And I do note that this was reported to the Serious Fraud Office, I think, Chief Executive, in 2013, within a couple of years of the new council being formed. But I think the legacy issues in that regard do cause concern, but if anybody has evidence of other corruption that may have occurred during that time, I would want that evidence presented to the authorities who have the ability to investigate it. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Penny Bright. And can I ask that somebody move a vote of thanks to Penny Bright? It's been moved by Councillor Casey, seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried.
Well done, Penny.
Right. We now come to public input and the local board. And can I invite Chair of the Albert Eden Board, Peter Haynes, and Deputy Chair of the Devonport Takapuna Board, George Wood, please to come to the table. Well, it's just Peter at this stage. George was there a moment ago. He has just re-emerged, but I understand that you wish to share the 5 minutes input, so not quite sure which of you will want to take the lead on that. Peter Haynes.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your welcome. Greetings, everyone. I would like to commence by saying very quickly how enthusiastic and optimistic I am about this term of Auckland Council. Watching in recent weeks the way that we've all worked together, that you've worked with local boards and with each other, the new mayor. It's been very heartening, and I think it augurs extremely well. And I like the reference to peace and goodwill earlier, and in that vein I hope that you receive what we're presenting with a great deal of goodwill. So we have the governance framework review, which is an excellent piece of work. It's certainly comprehensive, and that's gives rise to a few issues. It contains a range of possible points to implement, ranging from the extremely significant around funding and funding structure, all the way down to sharing workshops, briefings with between local boards and governing body and so on. So it is extremely comprehensive and very complex, is the first point I'd make. So the mayor suggested that we have a working party with 4 members of the governing body and 4 local board members to consider the implementation. There are 2 issues this raises for me, and I think these are shared, but George may want to add something. It's around representativeness and quality of decision making. So in the first instance, because it is such a fundamental piece of work, it is very important to be inclusive and to ensure maximum representativeness when we deliberate the implementation. So for local body members, really is not, we considered on reflection, doesn't necessarily give rise to much representativeness at all. You know, we want to see all of the various and very diverse interests, and each board is different, and there's a great deal of diversity, and we want to see as much as possible that diversity reflected in the decision making, so that everybody feels that they're represented and that they have a stake in it. There's the quality of decision making too, and there has been a great deal of research done into the optimal number of people that you have involved in decision making. I would just say, having some familiarity with that research, any number over 20, you quickly get into declining efficiency.
21.
21.
Oops.
No,
One of the councillors will have to leave now.
There aren't any. Yeah, well, that's all right. I think he'll be a bit lenient. But the yes, so it depends on the task at hand, and I would just say, in terms that you might be familiar with, Your Worship, we're not talking about a kitchen cabinet here. So for a kitchen cabinet, fine, yes, 6, 8, perfect. We're talking about a body that's going to deliberate, at length over something that's very comprehensive and complex, detailed, and that we have to get right because it's so absolutely fundamental. So I would therefore suggest that we need a great deal more than 8, and 20 was a number that many, if not most, of the local board chairs determined was the right number when we discussed this on Monday. So I'll hand over quickly to George.
Yeah, I agree that the local board chairs around the same table here on Monday discussed this. Majority was that 4 was totally inadequate. The optimum number was 10 from the local boards, and it doesn't mean to say that there needs to be 10 from the governing body. And in the sense of working together, that's one aspect that could be looked at. But the reason for that 10 was we have the rural sector with 2 local boards that they considered that they should be represented with 1 person. The Gulf Islands, they also stated that they thought they had a special case, so they should be considered. And then we thought that we could divide the rest of Auckland up north, south, north and south, west, and across the isthmus.
Central.
And 2 from each of those areas would be how we arrived at the 10. And it was considered over quite a lengthy discussion. So I think the greater number really indicates the sense of a strong working together that we wish to see, and we reckon that this is an issue that has wide-ranging implications for the future of Auckland, especially at the local board level, because there's a number of issues in here that pertain really to the local boards, and so that's where we came to that. And I'll also make the point that there are 149 local board members, so a substantial number, and we don't think that 4 adequately covers that number. So the importance of the review can't be underestimated. And I'd just like to point out also that we've had working parties since when I was here over the 6 years, things like empowering communities. I think that the working party there, which was greater than 4 from the local boards and 4 from the governing body, worked very well and came up with a decision which I think was accepted pretty universally when it came to the table. It may not be working. And the gambling working party, alcohol working party, they certainly had more than 4. So the local board people really think that we would be done a disservice if it is just left at 4 at this stage, and 10 was the figure that we came up with. There was 8 considered, but at the final analysis around the table, the chairman of the day, Julia Parford, put it, and she counted the number of the hands that went up at 10, and that was the number that people thought was the optimum number.